Ready?
Yep. So,
Genesis 9.
you an ESV again? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Let's do it. You can go ahead.
Okay, if my voice will let me. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. As I give you the green plants, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood, and your lifeblood. And for your lifeblood, I will require. Well, let's stop there for a second. Interesting that, well, as we see here, it's pretty clear that according to this, animals did not seem to fear man before this. It says, the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon every. So before this, did animals not have a fear of mankind?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. I really think this is also kind of interesting too, because it's a weird origin story to like explain why there's a conflict between man and animal. Because like typical
Mm-hmm.
origin stories, they have these like fairy tales, but it's like like man or a hero fighting like some cosmic figure, like some cosmic deity. So it's always like man pitted
Mm-hmm.
against like some majestic, like a dragon or a giant serpent or something. So I think it's
Right, right.
I think it does seem to indicate that like there wasn't conflict between man and beast, and it was just like this cohabitation that was healthy and like beneficial. But I think it's also really
Well,
interesting.
I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no,
Yep.
no, that's good.
No, what else did you find? Go ahead.
I just think that it's interesting that they decided to put like because people talk about how this is like a mythology, right? Like that it's supposed to be this like just another creation story, and it's like, but like I don't know. It just seems weird to me. It's so like primitive, and not primitive in the sense of like hero versus dragon, but primitive in the level of the depth that it goes to explain the very nature of the even the relationship between beasts and plant life and everything. Like
Right,
it's like
right.
it's
And it
almost
doesn't and it doesn't use any type of any grandiose mythological stories like you just talked about. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean that's pretty much what I'm getting at. Like it's very granular. It's very like depth. It's not like these surface level. It doesn't like presuppose a ton of additional stuff. Like it gets granular and it talks about why there's this fear and prey versus predator relationship, and I mean this literally basically
Well,
describes the food chain too.
in my view, well, again, going back to someone like Hugh Ross, right? We talked about him before, who believes in older Earth, older creation, and he believes that animals killed and did those things before the flood. But when I read this, it just seems to me that at least mankind, uh, did they not eat flesh? Because it says now I'm going to they're now food for you. Did they not eat flesh at that time? Um,
Seems like it.
I think the animals must have been killed themselves, must have been predators on each other before the flood. I mean, there was violence on the earth, right? Don't you think they would have been killing each other? And uh, there would have been regular predators before the flood. Maybe just the fear of man was not in the animals at that time.
So I think I don't know. It's a good question, but so it's two parts, right? Like man, man before so Cain is the first murder. There had never been murder before that. We don't know how many brothers and sisters and relationships that existed before that happened. But so like
Right.
murder would have been like not, it wouldn't have been common like it is today. First of all, that seems to me to imply also that most likely they didn't kill animals to eat them. They probably didn't. They probably grew sheep and whatever to like have a, to cohabitate with them, and to like have, sheep for wool and materials, and cows for producing milk, or whatever, I don't know, just things along that line, goat milk, whatever.
We do know that they killed animals though, because they killed. The story of Cain and Abel is about killing an animal.
Yeah, well, yeah, sacrifice, but I'm talking about like, because you have to remember, like, your thought process is, unless something is already taught to you, you have to develop it. So like, if Cain was the first murderer, it was a development of physical violence potentially, or hatred or whatever. So even if you killed animals like sacrificially, you wouldn't necessarily think to eat them. If you've only ever known eating fruits and vegetables and whatever, you wouldn't necessarily think kill an animal and eat it.
May not.
So like,
You may not.
yeah.
Right.
So it's kind of, to me, and plus you have to remember, like, Noah's he's the only guy. It's the only godly house on earth, basically, is what they say at this point. It's the only house that there's any righteousness left. So it's possible that Noah is the only one that's like maintaining like the old ways, or the original ways, and God is saying, "Here's this new covenant. Here's this
Yeah,
new
that's
way
what I
of
was
doing it.
thinking.
Through your lineage,
That's what I was
we're now
thinking.
going to make food available to
Probably
you."
before. Right. Probably before the flood. Man, maybe not Noah. Maybe not his family. Maybe they were continuing to stay true to what they had learned, but probably other men had begun to kill animals and eat them. God is now just saying that the fear of you is going to be, and the dread of you will be upon all the animals, and they're now food for you as well. So it doesn't. I don't think it says necessarily here that mankind in general did not eat meat before that. I don't think it says that. So I just think it says he's now allowing them to do it.
It's also
As part
possible.
of a godly what?
Well, it's just also possible that, like, I think a lot of people that have experience with animals, there's a pretty strong recognition that animals can sense your predisposition to them. Like people that hate dogs, or like whatever, dogs know, they can tell. They can tell
Mm-hmm.
just when they meet you that you're, if you don't like them or something, and they're standoffish. Dogs'
Mm-hmm.
intuition with that, or animals' intuition with that stuff is really strong. So maybe this is like, Noah, because he's righteous and he doesn't feel this, he doesn't have this kind of animosity, or there's not this, this conflict between man and beast. It could be something more along those lines, where there's this inherent distrust that's placed between them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas maybe Noah, because he was righteous and his heart was set a certain way, didn't, he was maybe like one of those animal people, so to speak, just because he had that heart, that disposition that animals are, receptive to, which kind of makes sense given the ark story. Also, he would have to have been,
Yep.
had a you couldn't have
Right.
had lions and stuff inside the ark, and then been like
And I was,
at your throat.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say that before this story, animals came to Noah, and obviously they didn't have a fear of Noah and his family because they got on the ark. There was no fear. That's why I think it's amazing that this starts off immediately with the fear of you. It talks about animals,
Mm-hmm.
talks about beasts. That immediately it says the fear of you is going to be. To this point, they came to the ark. You were friends with them. Now the fear of you is going to be upon these animals. So yeah, um, this it's just amazing to me that now that's the first part of this story. Actually, the very first part, it says we need to remember, is be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That was God's command to Noah and his sons and everybody after them. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Then he talks about the animals, which I thought was kind of thing he said. But obviously, he's saying that because animals were friendly to them, and now they're not going to be friendly. So,
Yeah.
go ahead. You can continue to read.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing. I think that this is kind of an interesting, because we know that the story of Noah is intentionally and specifically, like explicitly juxtaposed to, as a type, like typologically, to Christ. And I think it's interesting
Right.
the parallel between the Great Commission here and then the Great Commission there, which is go into all the earth and multiply, go into the earth and multiply
Right.
in the bringing people to the church sense, like sense of the
True.
type.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. So you get
Yep.
like this great commission from God to go out into the earth and to subdue it and to and to multiply and all that stuff, and then you get Jesus. He sends you out into the world and says bring them to the church, bring them go and multiply, so to speak. He doesn't say multiply, but
That's true.
same content or like same idea.
That's true.
So you left off at 5.
Yep.
So, and
Yep.
for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it.
Yes, that stop there. So he talks about the animals, but he's saying God is saying, um, basically the first time we've heard this, because that murder will require you to die. Basically, God is instituting capital punishment here. If you kill somebody, your blood's going to be shed, for God made man in his own image. He even says the same thing about a beast. If a beast, I will require it from. He also said, from every beast, I will require it, and from man. So both, even the beast. If a beast kills a man, then the beast will be killed. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. So capital punishment is being instituted here. Basically, God, in the past, God did not have that law. There was violence on the face of the earth. Obviously, before the flood, people were killing other people, but they did not. They did not have any type of reckoning for it. God, this is kind of one of the first laws, don't you think?
Yeah, I see. When I read this, I think of it more as like a natural tit for tat, and not in a court or judicial sense, but like there's almost like this rule of the world where he like
It is.
when
There is
Jesus
no court.
right,
Right.
but like when Jesus says like men who live by the sword will die by the sword. Like he's not saying literally like because you fight with a sword you're gonna die by the sword because like a there's like a the judge is gonna the judge is going to do it. Like it's not capital punishment in that regard. What he's saying is the lifestyle that you lead and the actions that you take. There's just this natural predisposition to this ending yield, like this yielding result. And the only reason that I think that is because it applies to animals.
I get what you're saying. Well, however, I get what you're saying, but it says here, and for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. God will require a reckoning. He's not just saying, like Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. He says, from every beast I will require it, and from man, from his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Uh, to me, it just sounds like God is saying here, if someone sheds the blood of man, he himself should be killed.
Oh, for
His
sure.
blood should be shed. So I'm not saying it's like in a court of law or they had any type of court or judgment at this point, but that is what God's saying.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that God will require a reckoning of that. A little bit different to me than what Jesus said. If you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. I understand what Jesus was saying there, but anyway, I do grasp what you're saying, though. Um, but later on in the law, God does talk about beasts killing man. An animal that kills a man should be killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the law.
Yeah.
It was before the actual law, but God does say that in the law eventually.
Mm-hmm.
That if a beast kills a man, that the beast should be killed. So he is kind of instituting that here. And I think he's saying that here because, like I said, before the flood, there was so much violence and there was no reckoning. Now God is saying there's going to be a reckoning. If you shed man's blood, you're going to die. Remember, he didn't even kill Cain. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't even set a judgment on Cain except for putting a mark on him, but he did not kill him for doing that. Now he's saying it's different. If someone sheds a man's blood, he's going to be killed anyway.
Yeah.
And it's also in verse 7, he says, be fruitful, multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it. So he said that again. So obviously that was God's command to them to multiply on the earth. So
And it's contrasting. I think it's intentionally contrasting the the imperative that God is giving, which is go forth and multiply, because he says that at the beginning. So that the beginning is go forth and multiply, and then he addresses murder, and murder is a direct antithesis to the imperative, which is go forth and multiply. And if you're murdering, then you're removing
Right.
lives. You're
Right.
subtracting as opposed to adding. So I think that it's
Correct.
intentionally sandwiched between those two things to show that they're very
Yep.
intentionally connected. The imperative is go forth and
Yep.
multiply. Murder directly violates that. And then again, don't kill people, go forth and multiply. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's intentionally sandwiched. But,
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And where God says here, you shall not eat flesh with its life that is in the blood. I'm just going to read this here. It says, the respect based on mysticism or superstition, but simply because blood represents the life of the being, whether animal or human. When blood is poured out, life is poured out. And we know that the life is literally in the blood too. Even scientifically, they have shown that our life is in our blood.
mm-hmm.
So, but blood was the sign of mercy for Israel at the first Passover. Blood sealed God's covenant with Israel. Blood sanctified the altar. Blood set aside the priest. Blood made atonement for God's people. Blood sealed the new covenant. Blood justifies us. Romans 5:9. Blood brings redemption. Blood brings peace with God. Blood cleanses us. Blood gives entrance to God's holy place. Blood sanctifies us. Hebrews 13:12. Blood enables us to overcome Satan. Revelation 12. Anyway, there's a lot of that's that's what blood is all about to God. Okay.
Hmm. We're on verse 8. So you want to pick
Yeah,
it back
I
up?
was kind of looking through there. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I established between me and all flesh that is on the earth.
Hmm.
The thing is, when you see a rainbow in the clouds, people just think of it scientifically, right? The light is
Yeah.
hitting the
Refracting the water.
raindrops or whatever, and refracting and making these light. That's what people say. It's just a scientific thing, but according to Scripture, it's literally a covenant God made with mankind. There's much more, according to Scripture. There's much more to the rainbow than just the scientific explanation of the rainbow. I mean, no one then didn't know how God created the rainbow. We kind of know how it's created, but obviously this must have been the first time they saw a rainbow.
So a super super interesting thing, and this maybe ties into this a little bit. I'm not 100% sure, but um, they were talking about how in the Iliad, which is one of like the oldest historical books that they have documentation for,
Yeah.
like manuscript evidence of,
Yeah.
and it's old. I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how old, but it's very old.
Right.
They were talking about how all of the colors in the book, or in like in the manuscripts, they're all within a very very limited visual spectrum. They're all like derivatives of red, and it's pretty much like brown, red, bronze, and like something else. And it's like this super limited. Everything, every word in it is some kind of really limited visual spectrum. So I think that it's kind of interesting that in some of the
Every word
oldest,
in what?
every word that describes a color, like they talk about the color of like the grass, and instead of being like having a word for like green or something that like specifically kind of talks about grass, it's like a word that means like brown. And for some reason,
Okay.
every word that they use to describe colors is in this really limited visual spectrum. And it seems like, it's just something that I had read before, that they were saying that people have actually posited that they think that people previously couldn't see the same range of colors that developed. So when I read this now, I think that's interesting. I don't know how old the Iliad is compared to when Noah is claimed to be, but that would be interesting
Right.
if it's like a if like part of the covenant is that there's an awakening and there's like an evolution of our ability to process those additional that additional spectrum. But
Maybe.
very
Yeah.
tangential.
I
But
never would have thought of that.
I remember reading it.
Yeah. Here, read this. Because the blanket of water vapors was released in the flood and the water cycle of the earth changed after the flood, this may be the first occurrence of a rainbow. God used the rainbow as a sign to Noah and all generations. Okay, so that he'd be faithful to his covenant. Like I said, if that was the first time they had ever really had the chance to see a rainbow. Um,
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
but when we see a rainbow, I'm simply stating that most people look at it. Oh, it's cool. There's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or they think of it scientifically. They really don't think of it being God's covenant to mankind that He will never destroy the earth again with a flood.
Yeah.
Um, now, there are still floods, but He's not destroying every living creature with a flood. It doesn't say He won't destroy the earth again. It just says He won't destroy it with a flood.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, okay,
Got Noah's
all right,
descendants.
okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
The sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the people of the whole earth were dispersed. Noah
Wow.
began.
Think about that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. Well, the whole. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess that makes sense. I mean, if there's only three sons and he's the only family left. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both of their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died.
This is one of the strangest stories in I mean they come through this whole ordeal. God speaks to them directly, apparently, somehow. I mean, and gives them the covenant. And the next thing you know, uh, Noah gets drunk. It's just the craziest story. I mean, there's much more to this story, I understand, but it's always an amazing story that this happened immediately after this. Maybe not immediately, but you
It's the
know,
next. It's the
within
next
a
thing.
it's, it's the next thing that's mentioned here. Um, and the thing of the story says, and Ham, father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. And so Noah says, "Cursed be Canaan." And Canaan didn't even do it. It was Ham, the father of Canaan, that saw the nakedness of his father, right?
So, okay. So, Israel is the name for the land. Like, Jacob is Israel, right? So, Jacob is the father
Yes.
of Israel. Israel is the nation of Israel, which are the people that are descended from Jacob. So, Ham is the father
Right.
of Canaan, and that he is the father of the people that are the descendants of Canaan.
Yes, I know.
And,
Right.
well,
The
what
Canaanite.
I'm getting
Okay.
at, though, is that so God's sovereignty, his plan, right, is he knows Israel is going to end up needing to be. He knows that he needs the Passover motif, right? he needs the salvation motif. So Canaan ends up being the promised land, which is where Israel comes. The Israelites come out of Egypt. They come out and they go to the land of
Mm-hmm.
Canaan, which is the cursed nation from Noah, which means that they can't be the descendants of the promise. So this is the beginning of the selection of the line. It starts with Noah. It moves on to Ham, Japheth, and Shem. Uh, Ham gets explicitly banished, hated, as we discussed in previous weeks. He's not part of the promise. So then you whittle it down, and it becomes a derivative of Shem and Japheth. And so you can already see the whittling down to the intended and the chosen lineage is beginning already. And it's happening because of, when I read that passage, I think Ham saw that his dad was naked and went to his brothers to shame him and to mock that his dad was drunk and naked, as opposed to respecting the father. You get what I mean?
Right.
So
yes, I do.
It's this relationship of respect towards the father, which is the whole point. That's literally, like, that's the definition of godliness, is perpetually remaining in respectfulness towards the father. So that's interesting.
Well, let me just read a little bit of this here, because I think it sheds a little more insight. And I've heard this talked about before on this verse, but this is the first mention of drunkenness in the Bible. Some think it was only after the flood that man made or was able to make intoxicating drink. Now, we don't know that, but some think that. Noah's own sinful and shameful actions show the foolishness of drunkenness. Well do the Proverbs say, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. There's many things that Scripture says about that. I won't read all that, but it was also shows the foolishness of those who claim God's desire is to make people drunk in the Spirit through the work of a Holy Ghost bartender. When Ephesians 5:18 says, do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit, it makes a contrast of the work of the Spirit with the effects of drunkenness. Anyway, so, and he became uncovered in his tent. It may be, it says here, that Noah was abused sexually by one of his sons or relatives. The phrase became uncovered, and the idea of nakedness is sometimes associated with sexual relations. Leviticus 18:6-20. It's basically saying here that it's possible that one of the sons or relatives abused him sexually because he became uncovered. You understand what it's saying?
Well, he says in ESV it says became drunk and lay uncovered. So I don't know. Maybe another translation says something differently, but
what does it say in the ESV here? What did
became drunk and lay uncovered. To me, that sounds like he got drunk and then just like laid in the middle of his tent.
Yeah,
right. But I don't know. I don't know.
Became uncovered anyway. Whatever it was, but saw the nakedness of his father. Others think Ham's only sin here was in seeing Noah's drunken, uncovered state, and that he made fun of him, mocking him as a father and as a man of God. Literally, the ancient Hebrew says that Ham told with delight what he saw in his father's tent. Determined to mock his father was undermining his authority as a man of God. Just as what you basically said. I just wanted to give that other viewpoint because I thought that was kind of interesting, but
it could be. I mean, it could be for sure. I don't know.
Let's see. It says here, cursed be Canaan. It seems strange that if Ham sinned against Noah, that Canaan, Ham's son, was cursed. Perhaps Canaan was also involved in the sin against Noah in a way not mentioned in the text. Perhaps the strongest punishments against Ham was for Noah to prophetically reveal the destiny of his son Canaan. We can trust God is not punishing the son Canaan for the sin of his father. This goes against the heart and justice of God. However, through Noah's prophecy, God told him that what would happen to his son. Interesting. It says, may Canaan be a servant. In earlier generations, prejudiced people regarded the descendants of Canaan as black people from Africa, and they used the curse on Canaan to justify slavery. But black people did not come from Canaan. Canaan was the father of the Near Eastern peoples, many of whom were conquered by Joshua when Israel took the promised land, the Canaanites.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And he also said, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. Canaan was all their servants. Huh? After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Oh, you read that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Noah lived 950 years. He lived a long time.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wow.
It's a weird chapter, but interesting. It's got a lot of like
Yeah,
deep
it's very
subtlety.
strange.
It's got a lot of theological implications, though. It makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, especially in the Revelation. Looking back at it, probably didn't
I
make a lot of
mentioned
sense looking from it
no.
forward.
Yeah, right. Now I know. I think I heard Pastor Paul, who I talk about sometimes, go into detail about that. I think he has a really good um, commentary on this in his video. You might. I'm just saying, anybody watching, and you look it up. Pastor Paul. He's from the Calvary. Is it Calvary Chapel of what's it? It's Oregon. I'm trying to think of the name. Oregon. It's in Oregon, the place. But anyway, uh, Pastor Paul. I can't think of his last, like a French name or something. But he does a pretty good commentary on this. All right, so I just can't remember everything that he said because to me that's such a strange um, set of strange story here. Right after the flood, I always thought that was so strange how it's immediately after the flood. Anyway, all right. So that's the end of chapter 9. Noah passed away after 950 years. He sure had a lot of experience in his life. Wow.
And he died. Yep.
Yeah. It always says, and he died.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's 32 minutes. So
Oh, wow. That's it?
yeah,
Okay.
if you want to do another one, we can.
We can't but stop that one.
Okay. On to
I
chapter
was
10.
I was also going to suggest to you, if you